Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Power Hour. Yet again, it's Monica Segura here, and yet again, joining me today is my fantastic colleague, our wonderful nutritionist, Isha Patel. Isha, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
I'm becoming a real pro at those intros. As we were talking today, and as we normally do, there is an interesting thing that came up, which I think we have to address to everyone that's been listening to us for the last weeks. As a trainer and a nutritionist, we have missed a great opportunity to speak about something that we've been asked for pretty much every day, which is weight loss. So today, ladies and gentlemen, your questions and your prayer has been answered, and your trainer and your nutritionist is actually going to address one of the most burning topics that you may have, which is how to go about losing weight, because it's not as straightforward as one would hope. So Isha, let's look at the basic information from the nutrition. How do we go about it when it comes to weight loss? So what are the first steps from the nutrition standpoint that we need to take to kind of change how much we weigh, essentially?
So one of the kind of primary basics of weight loss is higher energy expenditure as opposed to energy intake. So you want to burn more than you're putting into your body. And a good way of seeing what that is through a food diary. Sometimes being visual is always effective. So write down what you're eating, write down what times you're eating this, because sometimes you'll think that you haven't had anything in the afternoon. But when you think about it, you probably secretly snacked on lots of like biscuits, cakes in the office. You don't realise you're doing it, you're walking past. So I've seen this as a common kind of thing. And then it's looking at what your body is telling you, how you are metabolizing food, what your digestion looks like, what your energy levels look like. And they're kind of like the common obvious things, how much calories you should be in deficit for against your BMI and your weight. So yeah, they're the kind of common things I do. And then there's some non-obvious things that I look at, which also help, are really important. And I think lots of people ignore them. So yeah.
So Isha, I'm going to ask you a question that you're no doubt going to love me for, but calorie control, is it truly the best way to lose weight? Is it a universal way to lose weight, or are there any other aspects from a nutritional standpoint that we need to look at when it comes to that weight loss as a goal?
Calorie control is by no means universal. I don't think there is a universal way for weight loss. It works, different people have different metabolism, they store fat differently. So I'm not too sure if that's the best one. In terms of if it's effective, yes, it is. Those that go to like Jane Plan or Slimming World, they have found calorie controlling works for them. However, you do plateau at some point. So it's always about kind of pushing yourself. And it's working down to the cellular level, what is going on in the cell, and how is your body actually storing and metabolizing carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
And this is, I think, a really important point that I firstly want to put across to anyone listening to us. Yes, there's a huge benefit to calorie control for majority of people wanting to lose weight, but it isn't a full picture, and it's not a golden ticket to success, and it's not going to work equally as well for every person trying it. So if you've been listening to us in the last few weeks, you've probably heard Isha talking about gut health and microbiome. And I think it's worth for this particular topic to just remind ourselves how our gut health can impact the weight loss and how healthy or unhealthy bacteria can manipulate the weight that we're at.
So yeah, if we have a healthy bacteria or healthy microbiome system, because we're eating diversely, you're going to have all the right bacteria that produce things like short-chain fatty acids, that produce bacteria and digestive enzymes to digest and burn foods. You also have the correct strain. I can't pronounce them right now, but you have the right strain of bacteria that actually are found in lean individuals as opposed to obese individuals. So it's just about having a diverse diet and the correct bacteria. Particular ones I think were I'm probably not even going to bother. But yeah, Firmicutes and Protozoites I think are the ones.
That sounds like exactly the ones we were thinking about. So that alone, what are some of the ways that the unhealthy gut system can impact our weight, or how can it hinder our weight loss, should I say?
So, if you're eating lots of processed foods, lots of carbs and sugars, and basically all the beige carbs, you're actually slugging your colon down, you're making it more sluggish. It's not doing the essential effective peristalsis. So you're not actually shifting your stools, you're producing toxins that go up to the gut. You're feeding the wrong type of bacteria, the ones that love the sugar and the carbs, so they're overgrowing and causing you bloating, swelling, fatigue, your skin's looking bad. So overall, you are looking unhealthy, and you're getting into a fatigue state, which enables you to do workouts. And you get into a vicious cycle because you're craving these foods.
I think it's probably also worth mentioning right now, because there's a lot of people that, I don't want to use the word self-medicating, but self-supplementing when it comes to probiotics. And we've touched on that in the past, but I do want to stress that is probably not the best and most effective way of improving your gut flora. So as far as I'm aware, we need to test first. So the test should be done from a stool test. Should be assessed by a professional like yourself, so a professional nutritionist that can make sense as of what the right balance is and what we have too much and what we have too little in our body, and only then choose the right type and amount of probiotics to really make sure that we're helping ourselves and not further causing a further imbalance in our gut.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You should first make sure you know the level of bacteria you've got before kind of overdosing your gut with the same strain, or wrecking the system, because it's going to go into havoc mode. They do have fights in there, believe it or not. If you put someone in there that they're not used to, it will cause an upset.
So there's been a little bit about, quite a lot of talk about hormones and how hormones can hinder our weight loss. From the nutrition standpoint and the hormones that we can influence through nutrition, what is the real deal behind the connection between the hormones and the weight loss? How can we help it? How can we make it worse?
So there's a lot of complementing tests, and I think that's going to be up to the experts to kind of know about this. In terms of hormones, we know that if you're female and you have delayed periods because your estrogen and progesterone levels are kind of all over the place, that is going to slow down your metabolism. That's going to cause you to gain weight. For men, low testosterone levels also cause weight gain. But there are amazing complementary specialists that can test for this. I'm not too aware on that area to comment. But I do know that if you aren't having periods regularly, if your ovaries are kind of delayed and things are kind of backed up, that can cause weight gain.
Gotcha. What I would like to touch on when it comes to everything that we've talked about so far is the exercise side of things, because that is a huge I would say a misconception that exercise alone can really help you lose weight, and that there's some truth to it. It can definitely help, but most likely than not, it is not the main thing that you need to be looking at. So obviously exercise has numerous positive benefits on the body, and just from the mental health well-being, it is absolutely crucial to increase your daily activity levels, especially if we spend long hours sat at the desk, or we working in one position and we're struggling with some back or shoulder aches. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to weight loss alone, and I've seen that numerous times over the years as a trainer, we almost tend to choose the services that somehow helpful, but not really directly responsible for the reason why we're struggling with our large amount of weight to start with. So I actually heard, it's something that one of my professors used to say, which I think is really a good way of looking at it. You did not put on weight from not participating in sport, and you most likely won't lose that weight if all you do participating in sports. And I really like that line because it really stuck and resonated with a lot of people. By any means, the same way as calorie deficit contributes to lower body mass, then additional calorie expenditure will do exactly the same the other way around. However, this cannot be seen as that golden ticket for the weight loss, because simply there's just so much more that goes to it, and we always have to look at nutrition first before we seek more exercise for weight loss. Another interesting thing, which I've seen numerous times, especially with women, not exclusively with women, but especially with women, is the increased hours of cardiovascular exercise. So that might be cycling or running, in order to increase that calorie deficit and burn more calories, shall we say. That on paper is a great idea. However, very many of us will react in an absolute opposite way and start eating more to make up for the increased hunger levels that we feel. So the problem with increasing cardiovascular exercise, and especially large quantities quite abruptly without allowing your body to adapt to it, is that the natural response of your body will be to, as your metabolism speeds up, is to actually crave more food. Now, unless you're very strict about what you eat and how much of it you eat, which I'm guessing you're probably not, just because you won't be seeking the exercise in order to help you lose weight. It creates that vicious cycle. And I've seen so many people come into me with, I've been running 4 times a week. I've been going to the gym 5 times a week, and not only can I not lose weight, but I've actually put on weight in the last month. And then the misconception of, there must be the muscle that weighs more, so that's why I'm getting heavier. Yes, in terms of the density, the muscle is much more dense. So if we were to have a kilo of muscle and a kilo of fat takes way more space than kilo of muscle. But unfortunately, if the scales go up, that means even if you start working out, that means we're just adding to it. We're not changing one tissue to another, which is another misconception that we can't do. So it's very important for all of us to know is that we actually don't change one tissue into another. We're manipulating the levels of each tissue in our body. So as we lose weight and build muscle, we'll increase the amount of muscle tissue in our body and decrease the amount of fat tissue. We don't swap one for another. Yeah. If only, that would be amazing.
Exactly. So many people would be happy.
And that scale, if the scale is growing, that means we definitely have to look at what we're putting in our food, because it definitely does not come from you increasing your, it might be contributed by you increasing your energy expenditure, but it definitely isn't a result of you building muscle on top of it. So it's really important that nutrition is always looked at as almost the number one thing before we go anywhere else. And the great thing about it is, as we know, for many people, it's not so black and white as to how many calories I eat, what types of food I eat. It's also our habits. So the habits that we have surrounding the meal times, the quantities, the emotional eating, and this very often is probably the biggest success story for many of your clients, I'm sure, is to how to change the habits that you have around your food eating to actually bring back that balance and health, and make sure that you don't struggle with yo-yo dieting and you don't go up and down on scales. So actually leaning towards the diets, Isha, I know you're not a person that would recommend diets per se, but are there any diets out there that could contribute quite positively to weight loss?
I think, yes, from the research that I've read, and I've done kind of experimenting with it myself, and once it's worked for me, I've implemented it to my clients. And when you mentioned habits, so eating habits based on what we eat and don't eat can create some sort of inflammation, even if it's low grade in our body. And this is not just what's food, but it's our environmental and toxins, stress levels, how we're sleeping, and various hormonal responses are created as a result. So one of the examples is if you're stressed, you're spiking cortisol. And this increases white adipose tissue, so your fat cells, particularly around the abdominal and hip area. So that is your kind of stress weight gain. So by reducing inflammation down to minimal, you can eliminate weight loss and speed up metabolism. But that brings me on to kind of what we're eating and how we can kind of manage that. So when we're looking at diet, there is one, intermittent fasting, which has been quite popular in different ways. You know, people do 5-2 and whatnot. But what it is you fast in a particular window, and then you have a small eating window in which you kind of consume most of your food. And this is a good way to allow certain proteins to be switched on, increase your ketone body, and encourage the regulation of physiological functions. So one of the proteins it switches on is growth hormone secretion. So it's involved in muscle protein synthesis and lipolysis, which is known as fat burning. So this can be increased with exercise. If you are increasing your cardio or the endurance, you can actually increase the growth hormone. So for those that don't eat breakfast, I always say, well, if you're not eating breakfast anyway, you can continue, not eating until lunch. So say if your last meal is at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, fast throughout the evening until lunchtime, which could be between 12 and 1, and you've done a good, 10 to 12 hours of fasting, which is excellent. And then you have a small 8 to 9 hour window of eating. And studies have found that reducing the time allocated for food intake to a window of 12 hours can decrease your calorie intake by 20% and can encourage weight loss up to 4%. So there are some benefits in intermittent fasting.
And I think it's very much so worth saying that it helps us break that cycle of dependence on food and snacking. Something that's really tricky now, especially there's so many of us work from home, and the fridge is just about 5 meters away from us. So it's always great to go there and see what's new and what has popped out in the fridge in the last 2 hours. And numerous times I found myself just pointlessly going there, opening and staring at the food and actually sometimes picking it up. And luckily for me, I've actually always been that quite bad with eating breakfast all my life. I'm not that hungry in the morning. So I think that's my only saving grace, that I do tend to naturally eat very late in the day. And that kind of intermittent fasting happens almost naturally. But it is a lot of that. I think that dependence, if you find yourself constantly grazing and kind of unable to break those habits, intermittent fasting, at least to start with, can help you break that cycle, doesn't it? It helps you realize that you can easily go longer periods of time without food. And I would imagine that the moment you start seeing some fast results, it makes it also easier for you to stick with it.
Absolutely. And what I think people that, oh my God, it's like 3 hours until lunchtime. Well, have, warm water with cucumber, mint, or cinnamon sticks. These are good things that will help speed up your metabolism. So it's helping you, and it's quite comforting as well. So I always say, just stay strong to it and just stick it out. So these kind of little hacks help.
From the exercise standpoint, just because I don't want anyone to think that I'm against exercising for weight loss, absolutely not. And there are some key things to remember when it comes to exercising for weight loss. Is that we are focusing on a balanced routine, on a regular routine and a balanced routine, meaning that too much of just and too intense of a one thing will most likely not work. And it also causes our body to quickly adapt to it. So it means that you have to constantly push it, probably to the level that you won't be able to push it much further. And pretty much the same way as with calorie restriction, you'll plateau. So the more varied your routine, the easier it will be for you to steadily progress and maintain that healthy exercise regime throughout your week. Now, there's a difference between the physical activity and the exercise regime, and that's something that always gets confusing when people refer to it. When we talk about physical activity, is the total of all activities that we do in a day. So that might be walking to a shop, walking your dog, doing some shopping or cleaning around the house. All of those things count as our physical activity. You taking a bike instead of the bus, you walking to stops instead of going on the bus all the way, all of that is physical activity. Now, exercise regime is a structured regime that you would do, whether in classes, with personal trainers, on your own in the gym. You can obviously do that at home as well. But it has to be something that is structured and it pushes your muscles and your cardiovascular system to get better each time you do it. So it has to be progressive and it has to be structured. So that counts as a part of physical activity, but physical activity is not the same as exercise. So what is really important when we look at exercising is, yes, absolutely, we can increase the amount of cardiovascular exercise. And for many people, that works really well. They also find quite a calming time for themselves. They go for a long run and they feel great, both mentally and physically. But you can achieve a great result without including cardio at all. So you can achieve great results, especially when it comes to increased muscle mass, so creating a lean body from just strength training alone. I always advocate much of a balance. So I think the combination of the two in different proportions, depending on your goal, is great. When it comes to the strength work, especially for women, the one thing that I want to say, please don't be scared of it. Go and find the appropriate level and appropriate strength routine that will work for you. It can be more body weight based, like Pilates or say TRX training, reformer Pilates, or it might be weightlifting or combination of both. There's something for everyone, and the feeling of stronger muscles, better posture, and that beautifully defined body is an absolute boost to keep going when it comes to any weight loss regime. So it is a crucial part of the weight loss journey. It is just important to not to rely on exercise alone. The one last tip I'm going to give you without going into individual circumstances is to concentrate on compound movements, and concentrating on working the whole body. So if you're working on your body weight or body weight based equipment, then it's important that you work in both your upper body, your lower body, core, back, everything gets a good workout. So we don't just spend hours lunging and squatting. And same for our weights. We want to make sure that we cover all big muscle groups, and especially think about the bigger the movement, the more muscles are engaged at the same time, the greater the calorie expenditure, which is part of what you want for weight loss. So don't necessarily base your routine on bicep curls and hamstring curls. You want to get big movements in that will burn more calories and engage more muscle groups, so you get stronger and you burn more energy as a result of that.
And that's a great way to like also detoxify. Detoxification is our body, particularly our liver's way of excreting unwanted toxins, and sweating through physical activity is amazing. Like I always say to clients, do try and just go for a jog or try and sweat in any way. If it's a sauna or a steam room exercise, just do that. Because detoxification is really important in weight loss and the journey.
Absolutely. And I think we can probably spend here another 2 hours talking about all the ins and outs about how to go about it. And the truth of the matter is, the reason why there are professions like mine or yours is because it is a very individual journey. So if you are struggling and you're struggling for months, if not years, then my biggest suggestion and the greatest amount of frustration and money in the long run that you can save yourself is to actually seek the professional's help. So don't be scared, whatever it is that you feel you need more help with, whether it's nutrition or training, don't be scared to reach out for advice, because what we can do for you is something that you might struggle with unnecessarily for months and not years and go around in circles and go absolutely nowhere, whilst we can help you achieve that way sooner. And it is about paying attention to the small details that make you you.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with that.
Well, guys, if you have any questions regarding weight loss, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you so much, Isha. I think we've achieved our duty. Brilliant. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you, Isha, and I'll see you next week.